it is a gun court matter. The Auditor General has conducted an audit, a real-time audit, on matters related to the hurricane recovery. And specifically, there has been one about the Hurricane Melissa relief initiative audit, the one about the Starlink devices. It's not a very long report. I think it's only 28 or so pages long. And I've had the chance of reading the full report, except the attachments and so forth at the end. And I've heard Minister Vaz's response to the contents of the report. I find the report to be useful. And I really don't think that the report is to be viewed as condemnatory because of the contents, especially the contents that relates to Minister Vaz. I don't think it is to be viewed in that way, because the language of the entire document doesn't appear to me to be condemning. It is merely restating what is to happen, even within the context of an emergency. And if you look, for example, because, you know, one of the challenges I have with some of these reports, even matters concerning post-COVID, sometimes when I hear even some of the decisions that come out of courts, not only in Jamaica, but elsewhere, I'm thinking, where was I? What was I living through? Because sort of the pedantic way in which the decisions are made, you wonder, the situation, the circumstances seem to be completely different from my lived experience. And I find it almost sort of esoteric, as if the judges in some of their decisions, they lived on a completely different planet from the one we lived in when the world was shut down and things had to be done in a particular way. And it was just not according with a lot of common sense notions that had to be used in that once in 100-year experience. So I sort of look back at this particular real-time audit now concerning Starlink. I look at it as well through the same lens, and having read it, the substance of it in totality, and looked at the tone of the report, I'm heartened that the Auditor General says at 1.3, disaster relief efforts often face challenges, such as the need for rapid decision-making, fluid operating conditions, coordinating across multiple agencies, and heightened risks of resource misallocation, all of which can strain governance and control systems and increase public demand for transparency. And a real-time audit helps address these issues by verifying whether emergency procurement and operational processes remain compliant and properly documented. And it also evaluates the adequacy of governance and coordination mechanisms. In addition, the audit reviews controls over the receipt and the distribution of relief resources, and it provides independent assurance to strengthen accountability and further enhance disaster response effort. So it is my hope that this real-time audit is to be viewed in the context of a learning experience. Learning because we've never had a Category 5 before, and there are a number of things we have to put in place so that in the dead of night, if we are hit by a disaster, we can know after this, how do we act? with the emergency upon us, who has this responsibility to do what? And if that person isn't there, who is the next person who is supposed to activate whatever sorts of responses? What is clear from what the Auditor General has said? A minister never has the responsibility to initiate any discussions with any entity for the procurement of anything, even in a disaster. The procuring entity, the head of the procuring entity, is the individual who has that responsibility. And in this case, in relation to Starlink, the head of the procuring entity is to be the head of ODPEM. Part of the problem is because ODPEM is in a state of flux. It hasn't been lost on any of us. In the middle of the disaster, the entity had to be moved from where it was into the office of the Prime Minister. And I get that. I completely understand it because, listen to me, you see these procurement rules? Perhaps because of the history of the ways in which contracts have been awarded in nepotistic fashion and where people have, in unsavory ways, have been alleged to have benefited financially in times long ago. These rules are so skewed, so drafted, and remain at the moment that a minister who has responsibility for policy, or a member of parliament, or even a councillor, is never to be involved in any way at all in procurement. It becomes extremely lopsided because in this dispensation, every single thing that goes wrong in the country, every single thing that goes wrong is blamed on a politician. But the politician has no seat, no say in matters concerning procurement. So if ODPEM did not act to approve the Starlink, and if departments didn't get Starlink when the other mobile networks went down, the people of the country would chastise Daryl Vaz. And in fact, they'd bypass Daryl Vaz and go way up to the Prime Minister because he's often the target of criticisms. So the people who are accountable to the wider populace in Jamaica are those who are part of the elected class. And the elected class, from there, you choose the selected class of policymakers is chosen. But the selected class or the elected class has no place in the procurement. It is a most curious and almost stupid makeup coming because of our history. And I think we've gone too far with the procurement rules as is, and they are crying out for reform. So there's no doubt, based on even the amendment to the Procurement Act and the regulations which came in 2018, there's no doubt that somebody in the position of the minister or even as co-chair of the disaster recovery in the face of an emergency, he's not to be the person contacting anybody or any entity and then requesting the procuring entity to make payment. And that is all that this report is reminding us. I don't think it condemns Daryl Vaz, and I don't think Daryl Vaz is to feel condemned to the point of defending something that is not, based on the procurement rules, defensible. The big problem is not even in this report. The big problem is that you have this so-called National Disaster Fund Committee, which the Auditor General says did not effectively oversee the management of the National Disaster Fund. But this National Disaster Fund Committee has not been in operation. The committee was mandated to provide policy oversight, general administration, and effective management of the National Disaster Fund. It convened only twice during its tenure. The last meeting was held in 2022. The committee was appointed in 2020 and its term expired in September 2023. As at December 2025, which is about 2 months after the hurricane, there was no evidence of any new appointments, indicating non-compliance with the requirements of the Act. So the AG says she found that the National Disaster Fund Guidelines document, which was intended to support the administration of the National Disaster Fund, remained in draft. So because it remained in draft, and because there's no committee to meet, you have one of the stipulations under the Disaster Risk Management Act, which says that money can come from the National Disaster Fund on the authorization of the Financial Secretary after consultation with the National Disaster Fund Committee. But where you have a disaster and the committee has not met, and therefore the Financial Secretary cannot consult with the committee, is the law to be so stupid that the Financial Secretary cannot therefore withdraw any money from the fund because she hasn't consulted with a non-existing committee? And if the money doesn't come from the fund, where is the money supposed to come from? So the bottom line is, this particular report is to remind us about what is now absent, which is a functioning National Disaster Fund Committee, so that in the event of another disaster, the Financial Secretary can be properly advised by a functioning committee so that money can be withdrawn from the National Disaster Fund. Yeah? But then, as I said, the other thing in relation to the Starlink, the rules are so skewed against chief accounting ministers to the electorate being responsible, i.e. MP and ministers. They ultimately get the blame, but they cannot initiate anything. They're telling you the procuring entity is to be the initiating entity. So all you need to do, Minister Vaz, even in your capacity as co-chair of this committee, you are not authorized based on the amendment to the law to initiate any procurement. So know the hat you wear, and know therefore when you don't have the authority that you desire to take onto yourself, and make sure that the appropriate entity does what you believe is to be done, so long as the entity approves of it. Mark you, when Minister Vaz wrote to ODPEM requesting payment to this entity for Starlink, it is my view that if ODPEM did not approve of it, ODPEM should have said no. But they didn't. Let us use this report, as I said, as a reminder. I don't see it as condemnatory because I saw what those Starlink devices did for connectivity in Jamaica. Mark, we had some hundreds before that. And I need to understand why the full complement that we took based on this particular arrangement, why they were not all distributed. But I'm not approaching these things as if I didn't live through Hurricane Melissa and I didn't see what happened. I saw it, and I think when we read these things, we must understand that the rules as much as we want them to work, they do require tweaking, especially in an emergency.
Join us next time for Emily's Views on the Hotline.